Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a pretty unsettling theory from the Predictive History channel. It tries to answer a massive question. Why would a devastating and, frankly, irrational war suddenly erupt in the Middle East? And what if the real conflict isn't even between nations at all?
All right, so let's set the stage. The scenario laid out is pure chaos, a war between Israel and Iran that's escalating at lightning speed. But here's the strange part. Key leaders on both sides are being assassinated with stunning precision. We're not just talking about soldiers, but the very people you'd need at the table to hammer out a peace deal. So how is this even happening? And more importantly, why?
And this thing goes global, fast. According to the theory, Iran immediately targets Qatar's natural gas facilities, which, by the way, supply a fifth of the entire world's LNG. And they hit Saudi oil fields, too. The strategy is pretty clear. Cause the most economic pain possible by choking off the world's supply of cheap energy. You know, the very thing our entire global economy runs on.
Of course, the retaliation is just as brutal. Tel Aviv is getting absolutely pummeled by missiles armed with cluster warheads, which are incredibly difficult for air defenses to stop. In return, the US and Israel launched their own campaign to basically decapitate Iran's leadership and take apart its most critical infrastructure. We're talking everything from their economy down to their water supply.
Now, this is where it gets really strange, the central puzzle of the whole thing. You'd expect everyone to be horrified, right? But this theory points to certain factions inside Israel, specifically religious groups in Jerusalem, who are reportedly celebrating. An influential rabbi is even quoted as saying this destruction will bring the Messiah, so they're not sad, they're excited. And that makes absolutely no geopolitical sense.
So, how in the world do we explain that? Well, the theory proposes a whole framework to understand these contradictions. We're going to walk through it, looking at the internal conflicts in America, then Israel and Iran, to see how they might be driving this whole thing.
Okay, first up, let's really dig into that core contradiction. The theory highlights the assassination of a guy named Ali Larijani in Iran, described as one of the few pragmatic, influential figures left. Killing him is like taking the one person you could actually negotiate with off the board, and the argument is this is completely intentional. By eliminating anyone who could broker a ceasefire, both sides are making sure there is no way out. This war is literally designed to be fought to the very end.
So why would anyone possibly want that? To explain it, the channel introduces this central concept, the key that supposedly unlocks this whole mess. It's called the law of proximity.
So here's the big idea. We're all playing multiple games at the same time. But the theory says that the game that really matters, the one that dictates all your choices, is the one that's closest to you, your proximate conflict. For national leaders, this means their internal power struggles are way more important to them than any war against another country.
Just think about it in your own life, that rivalry with a coworker for a big promotion. That feels way more immediate and personal than some abstract geopolitical struggle happening thousands of miles away, right? The argument is that political factions inside a country work the exact same way. Their internal battles are what really matter.
Okay, so let's apply this idea and we'll start with the United States. According to this theory, for American elites, this war has almost nothing to do with foreign policy. It's actually a weapon being used in a domestic fight for the control of Washington.
And this really lays out the two sides. You have the elite, backed by what's called a massive private credit bubble on Wall Street. Their game plan? Use an unpopular war to hurt their political opponents. Then you've got the counter-elite, backed by the AI bubble in Silicon Valley. Their strategy? Use the same war to invoke emergency powers and seize control. Both sides are terrified their financial bubble is about to pop, and they both think this war is their ticket to being in power to secure a government bailout.
Now, if the divide in America is about power and money, the theory says the split in Israel is even deeper. It's a battle for the very soul of the nation. We're talking about two completely different and maybe incompatible visions for what Israel should even be.
This theory frames it as a conflict between two cities. Tel Aviv represents the secular, modern, materialist side of Israel. Jerusalem, on the other hand, represents the religious, conservative, and spiritual vision. So, for the Jerusalem faction, the destruction of secular Tel Aviv isn't a tragedy. It's seen as a kind of purification. They're playing their own proximate game, a spiritual battle for Israel's soul. And in that game, they believe the people have to suffer to be forced back to their faith.
This quote really captures that entire worldview. From this perspective, the physical world is, well, it's temporary. The survival of the modern state of Israel is actually less important than the spiritual state of its people. This isn't a geopolitical crisis to them. It's a divine spiritual test.
So finally, let's look at Iran. And, you guessed it, the theory says it's the same story. Iran isn't a single, unified entity. It's a nation being torn apart by its own deep internal conflicts, and this external war is just throwing gasoline on the fire.
Here, the struggle is between the Islamic theocracy and secular nationalists, and as the war gets worse, both sides get more extreme. The theocracy doubles down on its end-times beliefs, seeing this as a holy war. In response, the secular nationalists become radicalized, believing that the survival of Persian civilization is all that matters. The big question is, will their internal fight, their proximate conflict, actually tear the country apart, even while bombs are falling?
Okay, so what does this all mean? If these internal fights are the real engine driving everything, how does the law of proximity explain what we're seeing and where this is all going? Well, the conclusion is pretty stark.
Let's circle back to that first question. How are these leaders being assassinated? The theory's answer is chilling. The only way you get intelligence that precise is from the inside. The law of proximity would predict that internal factions would actually leak intel to their foreign enemies as a way to eliminate their domestic opponents, because for them, the proximate war at home is the only one that truly matters.
So the ultimate takeaway here is that this isn't just a regional war. It's a symptom of a massive global shift. It's framed as the final, violent struggle between the global, secular, financial order that we've all been living in and a new, rising order that's nationalist, theocratic, and driven by ideology. And all of this leaves us with one final, very provocative question to think about. If the law of proximity holds true, it suggests that maybe we fundamentally misunderstand how the world works, that perhaps the great dramas of history, the wars that really shape our future, aren't the ones fought between nations, but the ones fought within them.